Great farms. But yeah, I saw a presentation on showing that. I think it was that is zero. Scott Leslie was talking. I think the communication was. Because that was part of that program. Yeah, it's been a long time. I'm sure. Yeah. Yeah, it's funny how. At the latest, it would be the right. Well, that's the key to 3 years for this. No, I don't think so. This needs to reach this. I'm covering this. They Barley's. I'd like to go there for a bit. It's hard to read. Cold, crazy. Right. This is down here. There's no, but I couldn't, and with the picture I had, you know, blow it up. So there's room. We're on board of still other we shared it still. We either left in to the Hungarians, Ukrainians, or the Russians. But we were distinct people. We were the Greek Catholics. The Russian Orthodox. And there was some. I knew a lot of that. You didn't have police laws. Yes. I'm on the board. Oh, I know. That's why she was living. Yeah. There's celebrating there too. Well, and so it's we had really quite a project because it's 4 churches in the start off with like we had 5 of one areas now. But we were still business. High water mark of 110 months. So when you go to school, all these things, yeah. But tomorrow's Veterans Day, so we also have this vast network of ladies. These are involved in one program after another. Dissertation. Yeah, it's just my first semester. They're going to fill out what I started here. I mean, they did some digging work. But you also think about how real. We're missing link on the light show pad. Right alongside. Yeah. But they were going, they just tried to do the most of what they had called closed. So we're having taking it.
where it was 2 years.
Right now, we're where the League Night Park is now. Down by the Belly Center. And there. Right along there. Yeah.
I think also it's big.
Warren. Not much. Not much to go over now.
Actually,
There's overlap. There's a little down there, so it's larger than Moss. We got established like a trail that follows.
50th century.
It's different for Bennett to.
Working with actually split equipment because.
It's actually-
Part of it.
Not the original path, no.
And
The redone something like that.
And
The railroad.
there were lots of oil that went around that. Yes. And,
You mean where they dug a canal?
Yeah, so after the canals project in 1877,
and they also were.
built it in.
So
much.
I thought that they still have.
The ones that did it.
Everybody gets, oh, yeah. It's stigma. And of course,
That's it, I know.
it's kind of coming full circle. So it's an interesting story.
How are you? All on.
Yeah, we're very early.
It's.
I'm excited. How are you?
Please.
Really fun.
Okay, Amy, how are you?
I'm doing very well.
What do you like,
Until I'm officially part of the club though, you know, hopefully in the next 4 years, then I'll be in the club, you know.
Yeah. Your grad student, that counts.
Well, so the last lady in my so coming back, and I was trying to take her in time, but we got fried down there, all her, I didn't got completely fried there, we're on that, so I missed the rest on Friday. It was nice, I saw some, students, you know, and have one actually.
Yeah, it's like absolute insanity. It's not good. So that makes it. It's like the comments that are people keep coming and go, they go. So it was really nice that people said, like, hey, nice to
He was
some
talking
of them,
about.
one of them was posting pictures, I started following her Twitter, she posted pictures of like Mr. Peanut on the bridge.
Oh, yeah.
People are really sweet.
Let's hope you'll keep all over him.
German,
He was fun.
and he had a brother who was 10 years younger.
Yeah.
And his brother grew up before I go.
So in 2 years,
Everyone
how
had about.
long are you doing?
This week was good enough for them, so putting out fires, dealing with all the finances, or even to travel services, HR, and then to the individual speakers, so. Right now, I'm saying one, but, in a week, but I would cover.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's one of the things she invited. But yeah, I think to me, like, it's here.
you know, going to
And
farm.
I'm not,
At that point, he left. He said, Right.
So how's it?
Different than everything.
What could I, yeah, close.
But yes,
She brought like one day. And now we're supposed to bring Yes. It's not just another day of school.
Have you normally done this? I didn't know. Did you say this is, do we know if this works?
Sure. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming to the Youngstown Historical Center of Industry and Labor. We are here tonight to listen to Dr. Donna DeBlasio, a retired professor from Youngstown State University, talk about the evolution of the museum and its role in our community over the past 30 years.
Thank you, Dr. I'm hoping this thing will work. The center thing. Center one, side one. Am I being stupid?
Oh, turn on the remote. Does the remote need to be turned on?
It needs the little thing that goes in here.
Uh-oh. Okay, well, heck. Oh, it's inside there. Yeah. Oh, it's inside. No, there's also no battery in there.
You want me to stand here?
Would you mind?
Okay.
Okay, thank you, Sabrina. All right, go to the first slide. Okay, can you hear me without the mic? You can all hear me without the mic, yay. Good, well, thank you for coming, and I guess I get to do the Genesis thing in the beginning. I was here in the beginning, let me start back with this. In the late 1970s, the organization then known as the Ohio Historical Society was planning 3 new sites, and they operated over almost 60 sites around the state of Ohio currently. And one was supposed to be in Cleveland, one in Canton, and one here in Youngstown. Well, I cannot remember what the Canton was supposed to be. The Cleveland one was supposed to be an urban history museum, and that all fell by the wayside. And the only one left was here in Youngstown. And they had a friend in the Ohio legislature, and that was Senator Harry Michel. Senator Michel became very important in the moving force behind getting funding for this site, both for the structure of the building and later the $1 million needed to actually build the permanent exhibition. So without Senator Michel, there was no museum. So, and it would be a great loss. So that's why this classroom is named for Senator Michel. So Senator Michel did get the funding, and to go to the next slide. Oh, thank you. Okay, because it's a state-funded entity, the decision was made that there would be actually 3 entities involved: the state of Ohio, the Ohio Historical Society, and the pass-through agency would be Youngstown State University. Hence, we had a fairly early partnership with YSU, and they acted just as the pass-through agency for this new facility. And because it was state money, the only architects who can bid had to be Ohio-based architectural firms. However, the caveat, there's a little caveat, because they could hire an outside firm as well. And I believe there were 5 firms that were asked to bid, one of which was the firm then known as Raymond J. Jaminet and Partners. Well, Mr. Jaminet partnered with one of the foremost architects working in the United States in the early 80s, and that was Michael Graves, who was known for his postmodernist aesthetic. And if I don't really want to go into a brief architectural history of postmodernism, but it's a rejection of the steel and glass modernist buildings that Van der Rohe and others popularized the international style, where their motto was less is more, and the postmodernist motto was less is more. And so their goal was, one of the things they did is they adapted older architectural language and modernized it. And there's a lot of use of polychrome in the buildings, and it's very much reflected in this building. So Michael Graves was one of the leading postmodernist architects of his day. And these are some of the buildings he designed. The top left is the Portland building, Portland, Oregon's government building. And that is actually now on the National Register of Historic Places. He also did a lot of work for the Disney Corporation, including the Team Disney headquarters in Anaheim, California. If you look way at the top of the pavement there, I believe that is Dopey holding that up. So let's, postmodernists like whimsy too, obviously. He also did the Swan and Dolphin hotels at Disney World in Florida. And then one that's really contemporaneous with this building is the San Juan Capistrano Library. So those are just a few of the buildings that Graves designed. And because of him, we have another landmark structure here in Youngstown. Our building very much reflects his aesthetic and the use of the polychrome on the outside, the different shades, the different colors. These shades, everything you see in here, Graves picked out all the paint colors. By the way, if anybody cares, Benjamin Moore paints, but he picked out all the colors, and this was very much, again, his aesthetic. So that is why we have a Michael Graves building here in Youngstown. Okay, so these are some early drawings for the museum that appeared in a book about Michael Graves. And you can see the top one of the facade kind of morphed into what we have now. So there it is. Next one. I just have a few other. There you go. And I know, it's really funny. It's getting finicky. I don't know why. There you go. And you can see the cutaways, and then another conceptual drawing. This is the first floor plan, and it's pretty much how it looks, except for the fact the lobby now looks different. I will mention that. This one, the ground floor, and okay, this is the model that was built at the time that they took it around. Now, if you're wondering why we don't have it, we should, right? It was being shipped back to Youngstown, and it got lost. Yeah, I'm not kidding. You remember the scene in the first Indiana Jones movie where they put the Ark of the Covenant in some warehouse? I'm convinced that's where that is. It's someplace. It never turned up. It was FedEx or whoever shipped it, UPS, and it got lost. So it's someplace, maybe in a warehouse in Tennessee with lost, with the lost Ark. I don't know. So we don't have it. I wish we did. Yeah. It's a great story, right? Only in America. So, but there did exist a model. You can see it's a little bit different. So Graves, when he designed the building, he did talk about what inspired him to design the building the way it is. And he looked at industrial inspirations, since we are a museum dealing with industrial history. And the one on the top, which would be the east elevation, it's that way, I shouldn't point, but that is supposed to be the 18th century. On the back is supposed to be 19th century. And what was interesting, the original design didn't look like that in his conceptual drawing. He had actually what looked like a tipple on a coal mine, and it had metal braces holding it up. I shudder to think that in a windstorm. I am really glad that he did that. It actually gave us not only more exhibit, a little bit more exhibit space. That's where the locker room is. And there's a second mechanical room below it. So that's the 19th century. And then the 20th century is the octagon stair. That came from a European shape that he saw. And he felt that not only was it industrial in 20th century, but it was also a tribute to these many 20th century immigrants that came to this area and worked in our mills. So it's that symbolic feature. So now when you look at it, think about our immigrant ancestors, particularly European immigrants. Next time, okay, this is a groundbreaking in 1987. I did not, Susan kindly provided a photo that had me in it. I was not going to use it. Sorry. But that is Senator Michelle. Far left is Bishop Malone. The gentleman in the lighter suit, has been the mayor of Youngstown, Patrick Ungaro, and Dick Celeste, who was then governor of Ohio, is next to him. And I'm not sure who the gentleman on the end is. So that's who was at groundbreaking. This is what the site looked like for a long time, digging out the hill there. So that was. I half the time when I looked at it, I wondered what was going to be there. I got the pleasure. This is something I did not learn in graduate school. I had the pleasure of going to the weekly job meetings where you meet with all the contractors, and they tell you what they're doing and who the subs are. Yeah, this is Greek to me. Right? I'm a historian. And Ron Finera, who worked for Michael Graves, who has his own firm here in town now, kindly took me under his wing. And after the meetings, I'd ask him, "Okay, what went on here? I'm not sure I understand." He goes, "Oh well, okay, it's in English. I get it now." So that was my, shall we say, interesting addition to my career.
What was removed with you?
There was a parking lot on top and the railroad tracks have been taken out a while ago. There were the Erie tracks that ran behind there. There was no other buildings though. That was just hill. There's just a lot of there. So you can see early construction of the building. With a nice steel frame. And that's what the facade looked like when it was done, but no landscaping, so you can imagine that. The original plan, by the way, was that there would be, one of the things that Graves usually had on his properties was a pergola. And if you go back to, I don't necessarily what to do, but if we go back to that original site, the little model, there is a pergola there and other greenery that never happened. So there were also plans that the lot that is now a university lot, that we would also take that lot, and this would not have parking, it would be a bus turnaround. So school groups and things would be dropped off and the buses could park. Obviously, that didn't happen either, but you deal with what you've got. So, okay, so if you ever wondered how that pulpit got in here, it didn't go through the front doors, obviously. That's it coming. It came from Cleveland, so you can see how it's coming in through the back. This is on the east elevation, and those doors open up on that side, and that's how it got in. Never to be opened again, but they really have some issues right now. A little bit of leaking, if I'm not mistaken, on that side. They repaired that, thank God, because that was not pretty. So there it is. So now you know how the pulpit got in here. It's kind of interesting.
Excuse me, what happened to the one, the section 2?
I don't.
Brothers were, they had, I worked on Blooming Mill.
Yeah, I don't know. We got this from LTV and Cleveland. Was then
Yeah, I
LTV
know, but I wonder
Cleveland.
what happened to the one
Probably scrapped.
in
Yeah. So that's the infamous pulpit. And it's really what the other interesting part was. Yeah, the building was completed in '90. And but we didn't have any money at that point to actually do an exhibit. So there was all kinds of, shall we say, sniping in the press about, well, this building, and then Senator Michelle did acquire the $1.1 million that we needed, and that money was used to build the exhibit. And what they did is there was a team of curators that worked for the Ohio Historical Society that worked on the permanent exhibit, and we'd acquired stuff over the years. and then produced it. So but that was a big deal getting that pulp because we didn't know. Originally, the idea with that overlook was that, well, maybe we'll put those, we have the mill models downstairs on the ground floor, putting one of them, but then it occurred to people, that's like, 20 feet below there. They're not that big. Who's going to be able to see them? And this made a much better piece. If you're curious, the video that goes with it was filmed at YHCIL. It was their, well, it was actually their slab mill, not their blooming mill. But that they took, shortly after we shot the video, they took that mill apart and sold it to the Chinese. And it's probably still operating, 40 years later somewhere, 30 years later, somewhere north of Beijing. And because they replaced it with a continuous caster. So they went to the newer technology and sold the old mill there. But that was probably the last footage ever taken of that mill in Warren. So if you ever see that again, now you know. Next one. Okay. So I'm just fast forwarding to 2010. I mean, that's really the history. That's how we got here. Since that time, OHC itself has changed dramatically. And they were looking for local partners to operate a lot of their sites. And thanks to Dr. Palandi in the back of the room, among others, we became part of their team, as it were. And we have a management agreement. It's starting in 2010 technically, but we were actually doing a number of things at the museum a few years before, trying to help them pick up their slack because they really didn't have many staff working here in the whole thing. So next. So out of that, we got graduate assistant interns. Thank you for those of you around today. And some student staff. New events that we've started and in conjunction with the university, and new temporary exhibits with student projects, and we've done traveling exhibits over the years since 2010. This was a traveling exhibit we did called New Harmonies. We didn't do it, we installed it. This was it's a Smithsonian traveling exhibit we were able to get through the Ohio Humanities Council. And those are some of our students installing the exhibit. So they got some practical experience dealing with bringing an exhibit from outside in. This was one we did in 2012 for the 1937 Little Steel Strike. Yeah, there were 10 panels, and this was a product of the curation class that year. And we did this. It was a 3-part commemoration. We did the exhibit on Little Steel. We also did another exhibit on New Deal art and labor, and that was in conjunction with the Maslin Museum. We did a lot of work with the Maslin Museum as a partnership, and we also had a conference on labor in the Great Depression and World War II. So that was this site and YSU, this site and Maslin Museum won the Public History Award from the Ohio Academy of History for that. So that's the kind of thing. And what you see out there now, those are both student projects. Well, the nurses was, I know Dr. Wilson did a lot of work with the nurses, but we're working with the students and the Pollock Company with staff and students, John, Dr. Leary. Some of us worked on the Pollock Company. So with that partnership came, more minds and more help to do things.
Do you have a partnership with the Butler Institute of American
No,
Art?
we don't.
Because that would have, they have meetings about the strike and all that.
I know they do. They have that We Demand, and there's another one of the 16 strike. Yeah.
That would have been, even if you could get a copy of,
And we also had student capstone projects. This was going on in Italian Americans. That talk about literally a traveling exhibit. That exhibit has been in more places in the city and it's in the area in the Mahoning Valley. It's visited the Warren Italian Fest 4 or 5 times now, I think. So it's gotten around, but it's been a really popular one to travel. The New Deal or the Little Steel Strike did travel as well. I went to the Maslin Museum and it went to the Cleveland Public Library. So that one got around as well. Next. And then, of course, we have annual events. This is our History Across the Humanities Conference. This was the first one in 2015. The speaker was Pat Williamson, who was then the executive director of the Ohio Humanities Council. And we've done it ever since. And Dr. Fluker has taken up the reins of doing half. And it's going to be even better conference this coming year. And then another event discussion, we had a discussion with Dr. Leary, was one of the participants in that too, the 1916 Still Straight, and Senator Sherrod Brown. It was scheduled after the event because we had to wait till Senator Brown had an available date, but that was quite a nice event. And I said I would talk about the lobby. And, you know, Michael Graves designed us a really lovely building. And it's nice to know that, I mean, it won several awards, by the way. We got an award from Progressive Architecture Magazine and an award of achievement. We got one from the Ohio Society of Architects and one from the Northeast Ohio chapter of the AIA. So we are an award, this is actually an award-winning building. Well, sometimes, shall we say, they may have a great eye, but they're not functional. And we never, I think several people in this room could tell you how non-functional the original front desk was. For those of you who remember it, it was flush up against that wall. And we also didn't have those terrific exhibit cases that we have, and to allow us to do all kinds of other things and our monitor and everything. Well, you know, people would walk into the building and totally bypass the front desk because you couldn't see it. And so those of us who weren't tall, you could see like this much of our head. So we were able to get it redesigned to what you see now, thanks to the generosity of the Batanti family for about $50,000 they donated. That is why it's the Batanti Family Welcome Center. This was the opening. That is one of the doctors, Batanti, speaking. And we did a little exhibit on his family for that. The remnants of some of the text are out there as Pam is telling you about that. So I think this is like one of the best things we could have ever done because we got the beautiful casework. So the temporary exhibits, we're going to have objects in them. And I just think it's all around a nicer space. And I still think, you know, we still have the nice, if you stand in the doors and you come in and look straight through, you have that really nice long vista all the way through the back of the building. It's still there. It's still the same thing. The colors, these are when they repainted the lobby, they used the color chart that we had that were in Benjamin Moore colors, and there you go. So that leads us to today, and I don't know, are there any questions? Comments? Dr. Fluker.
I have a question. You already spoke to the relationship between YSU and the kind of projects that the students do here, but I wonder if you could just kind of elaborate on that a little bit more about, and I'm kind of putting words in your mouth, but the importance of having a site like this to serve as a classroom and as a place for professional development for students, and sort of how unique that is in the landscape of, you know, the history and public history education.
I would say yes. Thank you. Yes. I think from experience, we can tell you that the work that the students have done here has led to other opportunities for them. For example, we had 2 years in a row, Middle Tennessee State has a PhD program in public history. They only fund one student a year, and 2 years in a row. That funding went to one of our students because not only did they have the paper, but they had the experience of working here as students and doing exhibits and doing cataloging and working in the archives. So that got them the job. And that's happened to a number of our students that have gotten jobs because of here. And most programs don't have their own site like this. And I mean, not to ignore archives, it's not only the museum end, it's also the archives end. Is they do work and get the students who are interns here, get work in both part of the major, well, and the other parts too. There's also the education thing and public events and all of that goes into running a museum. So yes, thank you for stating that. This is why so many of our students have been able to go on. They may not necessarily it may not necessarily even be directly related. We had one student who was making 6 figures doing exhibits for an optical company, but she had a master's in history with the certificate. And she had experience in AmeriCorps as well, and she had been an assistant here. And because she had experience in doing exhibits, she got hired. So, and got to go to Paris like in her second year. I can think of more skins. So that is so important to get that experience, because we can yammer all the day about theory, or I can tell you, hey, this is what we do in a museum, but you've got to go and do it. I always tell them about one of the parts of, for example, National Historic Preservation Act. One of the important parts of that is what's called the review and compliance part. Section 106. I've done 106, and I can tell you all day long about how to do it. It's when you actually have to do it, it's not the same. It's like teaching too. You can learn all you want about pedagogy, but until you're in that classroom and experiencing it, it's not the same thing. So that's why that hands-on experience is so important. And that was a long answer to that question.
Can you elaborate a little bit on how you acquired the artifacts?
Oh, I really should donate my badge instead. Still mill. Oh, is it the still mill? I gotta find that thing. A still mill, oh my God, excavating crew team. I was the crew leader. I talked to a lot of the mills that were existing, but this was you're doing this in the late 80s, right? The mills. Timing is everything, right? And we were collecting this as the mills had shut down, and a few were still living, or there were hopes of maybe reopening parts of the Shooting Tube Camel Works. And I approached them, and they let us go in. After, of course, you have no idea what kind of paperwork we had to sign about liability stuff. I mean, it was like, okay, all right, but we went in and that's how we got it. And other people just donated. And people would, call us and walk in with stuff. We worked with a lot of people like your father, Ed Mann. Beth is the daughter of Ed Mann, who is a leading labor organizer here in the Valley. We have a big quote from him in the hanging in the gallery, and we have oral history with him. That was another thing. I collected a number of oral histories with people, and we did ask them a lot about the closings and all that, among other things. And that's how we did it. It was really going through, and a lot of either people can't, it wasn't sitting on your button waiting for stuff to kind of happen. It's just going out there and asking.
What percentage of the collection is in storage versus what's on the permanent exhibit?
95% in storage, 5% on exhibit. 5 to 10, well, I say 90 to 95% in storage. And that's typical of most museums. They exhibit about 5 to 10% of their artifact holdings because people have a lot of stuff. Now, if anybody puts it all out there, you really have a lousy museum. I don't know if you've ever been to a place called Shelburne. It's in Vermont. I heard they've improved. I haven't been there since the 80s, but they have a collection of buildings, these museums in there. And I have never seen so much stuff shoved into like these buildings. And one was all like Cupid dolls. It was the weirdest thing. Cupid dolls. That's not a good exhibit. I mean, you got to pick your artifacts wisely and help them tell your story and your images and whatever else you're using. So yeah, it's not a whole lot of stuff on exhibit, and a lot of the things. And I know we have like a bajillion hard hats. A lot of those wind up in what we call the teaching collection, so we can bring them out, and kids love to try that stuff on, the clothing and all that. We have a lot of that. The ones that are personalized would not be the ones we would put out, but we have like a whole staff of white hats. The white hats are supervisors, and we have a lot of those. So for some reason, we have a lot of those. And other things like that we don't put out. I mean, they're part of the education collections, but they are part of the collections. So that's it. I mean, you don't want to imagine that if we just put every tool we have out. I'm just thinking of that. First of all, there's no room. We have no room to interpret anything. Any other questions? Yes.
You said you got on the Shooting Tube property. Did you ever go into the administration building that was on Walton Avenue?
I have been in that building, yes.
I was,
But that was after I was here, not when we were collecting. I would love to do, well, I was in the hospital, that's right, not in the administration building. I was in the hospital building.
Okay, but there was a time that that building was just sort of abandoned.
Yeah, that one.
Yeah, because I even went in there one time. I was working out of town. I graduated from YSU, but I've never worked here. I've been other places with Alcoa. But anyhow, I went in there and upstairs there were still beautiful pictures on the wall and all this stuff. Of course, it was a mess, you know.
Well, yeah.
And then all of a sudden, I never got back, but they had torn it down.
Yeah,
And I wondered if you were on a collection trip to,
We couldn't get it, they didn't let us in there for some reason.
it was open for some reason, you know, and, you know, somebody had to probably broke
Yeah,
into it and I just happened to be
But,
there.
you know, we prefer not to do midnight curating.
It was amazing, the things that were in there, you know.
It doesn't give you a good reputation. It's really hard to get a deed of gift for that stuff. But I understand your point.
But there were beautiful things on the
Oh,
wall.
I'm
you know.
sure, I'm sure. You know, but occasionally that stuff turns up here too, because somebody said, look what I got,
Oh,
okay.
yeah.
You know, ask no question. But, you know, it was not easy getting into what was, they were owned by LTV. It wasn't, you know, it took a lot of talking them into it, like, yeah, you know, we'll come and we promise not to do this, that, and the other thing. That's actually how we got the lockers too, for the locker room.
That is beautiful, the locker room, though. I remember, because I worked 3 summers in the shoot, and that's the way we put up our clothes and things on the chains, and ran them up and then brought them down, and
Yeah,
the showers and so forth.
everybody complains that it's too clean. I say, yeah, well, that we can't help.
Well, there was sometimes they would clean it. It was not dirty, it was not.
Yeah, but it's a mill, you know?
But it was the mill, and it's the people who were supposed to clean it up, it was their job, and some were good and some weren't.
Considering you have a number of museums here in Hunting Valley, I was saying, and I'm sensing there's more cooperation programming. Is that you found that to be true with this museum as well?
I think Marcel might be able to actually address that better than Marcel right here. Yeah, she's right here. She could probably address it better, because Marcel's the current manager and.
Oh, sorry.
Repeat the question?
Yeah, I was wondering if the Museum of Labor Industry Labor is working with other museums on the programming.
We are. We actually have a student exhibit going up in February that Dr. DeBlasio's class is doing on Black Youngstown. And we're going to be working with the Kinsman House in Warren, where they're going to have an exhibit on the Tuskegee Airmen in February. We've invited other educators and directors from other museums to come here to speak to our public. We actually had Phil Lawson here from Hunting Valley in April, and he spoke about some of the labor history that was going on in the area. But we have a really good relationship with all of the other museums. They do an excellent job, and we're happy to help them out when we can, and they help us out when
It seems like the relationship could be complementary.
it is.
Right,
It's not competition.
Right, sure.
You know, we all have more special needs.
Right.
Mhm.
Yeah, I like to talk about it.
Okay.
Yes.
You get the international people come, and they,
Yeah, since in the beginning, they would come, we had folks that came to see the building. They wanted to see this, I mean, because by the time, but it was before we were actually open. We didn't open until April of '92. That is why it's obviously 30th anniversary. But we had a temporary exhibit, and like I said, the building was completed in '90, and the staff such as we were moved in. We had a curator and archivist, and we had a person for the front desk, who's also the janitor, not a big staff. And the Historical Society designed a temporary exhibit that was just here in the lobby, because they were building the permanent exhibit. And that was, by the way, almost all of that was done in-house. the original exhibit was built in-house and designed in-house. It wasn't now like, oh, we tend to hire a design firm or whatever, but that was all done with then OHS and their company, their design department, which I believe is a department of one right now. I don't know if Bill has another person, and Bill Mann he was hired about that time. He's now is the design department. He worked on this exhibit. So we just, it's nice to have that kind of memory and that connection. So people would come in just to see the building because it was a Michael Gray. And I remember we had visitors from Japan of all places, and a lot of international visitors.
Well, and they continue to visit. I know when during the election of 2015, they were coming and asking about the economy and the downturn and questioning, why our area would support one or the other. We've had them from a variety of different places: Holland, England, Scotland. They come in there investigating not only the steel industry, but also the decline, deindustrialization, and then the rise up from the ashes, if you will.
Yeah, we got interviewed, I think was it an English crew? I think they were, or the Germans, maybe it was a German crew. I got interviewed by one of them in 2016. So and it was exactly what they wanted to know about. Like, it ended up, yay, good. More PR for us.
A lot of history now, especially in the environment we have right now, is contested. Have you had to navigate that as an institution?
I think one of my fondest memories, this was a few years ago, we would like to eventually be able to rehab that exhibit. I mean, it really needs, it's a 30-year-old exhibit, and it's time. But there was a prospective donor who came through, someone that brought them through, and all they did was complain about how much labor that we had in there. So I mean, it's all relative, isn't it? I said, what do you should do with management? Show a desk? I guess, I don't know. But I don't know, Marcel, you might be able to, again, speak to that better than I can, since you're dealing with it now, when the stuff has really gotten to be.
Yeah, it just depends on whether people come in with their expectations are, whether they're looking for a labor story or a worker story. And especially as you talk about deindustrialization and closing the mills, it's very contested. And a lot of people are very negative because of what happened.
Right.
And so you have to kind of balance your approach to provide the facts with some interpretation, but then allow for the fact that there are different opinions on both sides. And the emotions were running very hot because it was devastating when the Muslims did that.
Sure, right. Unless fingers being pointed.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah, it was also interesting doing oral histories at that point too. And and to your point, Marcel, I think even when we were getting started, there was a lot of, talk about, oh, why are we doing this? And blah, blah, blah.
A lot of anger.
A lot of anger. Understandable. I mean,
There's still anger.
you get it. I mean, they felt, their livelihoods are gone. They made decent money here, could raise their families, send their kids to college, and leave the middle class life. And all of a sudden, the rug is pulled out from under you. And I mean, all of a sudden, as we know, it started on Black Monday in 1977, and then worked its way up through the last meal in '84. And so that's like really fresh. When you're doing this in 1990, it's about the time we were doing the oral histories. So there was understandable, and a lot of folks did talk about that. And there was some complaint, but again, not misplaced. But I'm not sure we're quite to the level of contention over Confederate statues. I mean, that stuff that's just like, oh God. I live down in Virginia, so you understand that, right? That's a hot button topic, to say the least.
Right.
Amy,
Dr. Beach, back on that question, because you mentioned in the early days how there was some sniping about the building and what it was going to be used for.
Mhm.
And please correct my memory. Did I read something once upon a time about there's kind of a counter movement to the museum where there was a suggestion that it would be better to preserve a site versus creating buildings? I don't know if there's any truth.
Thank you for mentioning that. Somehow I blocked that. I don't know why. But the original idea was that they would take over the infamous one and only Jeanette blast furnace and make the museum there. And apparently that would cost a heck of a lot more money than building a brand new building, because you'd have to clean out the asbestos that's like everywhere around the site. Besides that, you still had part of the mill was still operating, what was left of the Briar Hill Works. At that time, there was it's Valor now, but it was North Star, thank you. And it just it wasn't feasible. They did it at Schloss Furnaces in Birmingham, Alabama. And basically the site is sort of a venue for pop and rock concerts mostly now. I assume the museum is still operating, but you can't operate the blast furnace. You can't show, how are you going to do that? So you really can't any better than we can do it in a building like this. I should do an exhibit. And you would have had to build an exhibit space and offices and everything that didn't exist there. So in the long run, it probably would have been a lot more expensive to do that. And this was just more practical, was to build a brand new building and do it from scratch and design, deliberately design exhibit spaces and an archives. We are, by the way, the only OHC site outside of Columbus that has an archives. None of the other sites do. And that was deliberate because at the time they had they had a labor history project connected with OHC. And so we wound up with some of the material here that was collected over the years.
What are some of the challenges? I mean, museums in general, and this museum in particular case.
Well, the challenge for most museums is money. Can I be honest? Museums do not make money on their admissions, period, end of sentence. I don't know of too many that make money. I mean, maybe, I don't know, maybe the Smithsonian doesn't charge admission, but again, but they're also, they're the same, basically, a similar setup as the OHC. They're a public-private partnership. They are a private not-for-profit that gets a lot of its funding from the federal government. The Ohio History Connection is a private not-for-profit that gets funding from the state for certain functions, including an allowance for their site, the state archives, because they hold state records, and we do too. We have local government records here, and the State Historic Preservation Office all get funding from the state of Ohio. And so there is that it is very much a public-private partnership. So that helps a lot. But I really don't, if there's a museum, a nonprofit museum out there that makes money on its admissions, I would love to find out who they are. We have the non-existent gift shop. That was something they did not plan for, and they should have. We do not have a gift shop, even a small one. That would be nice because you can make some money. And of course, places like the Smithsonian, they're all huge and they have these wonderful gift shops and catalog, other big entities. But that is a good source of funding for museums. And we have to rely on grants.
Are there plans for a gift shop at any point?
We laugh about that. Maybe.
Right.
Yeah, that was actually supposed to be part of the redesign with the new lobby here, but that didn't have money for it. So no gift shop. There's also nowhere to really. We're trying to figure out where would you put this thing. I mean, there really isn't a space to do it, unfortunately. But no, that's the one thing. I have no idea why they didn't do that. I really don't remember what the conversation was. I probably wasn't in on that conversation, but I don't know what went on and chose not to do a gift shop. So.
That is the biggest source of revenue.
Well, it can be a good source of revenue. That's why I never mind spending, why I mind spending money at museum gift shops, because I know that. I know that it helps support them. So. Any other questions?
I wish to ask this many years ago.
Okay.
I get asked this a lot. How in the world did we end up with collections from Woodside Hospital? Because that's something I went through.
From Northside Hospital?
From Woodside.
Woodside?
Yeah, we collect local, they are labor and industry, so that would make sense for us to collect that. We have some of the union records from the Youngstown General Union Nurses Association, which makes sense, because they were union and then they were local workers.
I think Martha B has an answer to
Okay.
Martha Bishop.
The Woodside Hospital records were, state archive series. We no longer hold those, they were transferred back to state archives in Columbus. And there was, they fall into a category that OHC has determined that it is best to err on the side of caution and look at those. There's administrative records, but because there might be patient or confidentiality, medical kinds of records, that they're treated like HIPAA. They are not just routinely open for public research like other state archives records would be. If there are medical, personal types of information involved, then they're restricted to just working with them. But it was part of a state archive series of records that it was housed here for a number of years, but then was transferred back to Columbus.
How do you, how do you narrow the scope of what you accept? Because obviously, the labor industry can encompass a lot. You had industry supporting baseball teams, often in ethnic neighborhoods.
That would be included. That'll be included.
I mean, where do you say, okay?
As most museums should have something called a mission statement.
Right.
That's what you determine in collecting policy to go with it. And that's what you normally would determine.
Right.
It is, you're right, it's pretty broad, and it should be. I mean, there's a lot of stuff related to labor and industrial history around here. You know, but that is something we talk a lot about in our museum curation class too, that learning how do you know what to take? But that mission statement should be your guiding light.
Sure.
I once heard that a good mission statement will fit on the back of a business card. I'm not sure that is. But Martha, Dr. Randy?
I want to point out that what Donna said is the reason why the Black History Program and History Program of YSU are the entities that OHC trusts to run this. That it may look from the outside like anybody can run a museum. It's not true. Not true at all, because I mean, your question is a very good one. How do you know? And there's a fairly select subset of the population, or even of historians who would be able to answer the question.
Then you can't collect everything. There's that too. As much as you would like to, you can't collect everything. Yeah, we have one of those. Several of those, I think. We have all kinds of interesting things.
But I was just wondering specifically in terms of ethnic communities, how much would you, I mean, would you collect textiles in ethnic communities because they were represented in the workforce, or would you say it's not really?
I think it would depend, wouldn't it? I mean, to me, that would, it depends on.
We might also have a conversation with Company Valley and ask them, is this something that would complement your collection?
Right, sure.
Because, you know, we have a few things from my door part, but do we need everything? No, of course not.
Sure.
And now Company Valley is going to be getting a big collection. It should, you know, it makes more sense for it to always be in place when it can be.
So, but they've been kindly loaning us stuff too.
Yeah.
We borrowed.
Yeah, Medicine Kitchen.
Yeah, we got that, and we did an exhibit on bomb shelters. There were some manufactured, or they were sold in this area, manufactured here, and we borrowed 3 things from them for that exhibit. They kindly loaned them to us, and some videos that we used from that too. So, you know, we try to be good neighbors, I think.
Right.
That's what we can. Yes.
I don't remember, but do you feature anything about the steel industry that still exists, like Bellarex or, I guess there is something.
We had a whole exhibit on Valorant.
Yeah, Bellarex, but what about like Ajax Magnethermic that created the induction heating of steel, you know, in a production line, and they would have another name now, but Ajax Magnethermic was really.
No one has come forth with that material.
Yeah.
No one.
No one that I know of. I mean, these guys can tell you they work here now. So.
When that material comes forth, then it will be considered for collection.
That's how we got the valve, Rick. That's how we did the
That's how we
valve.
got that. Oh, they came to you.
They came to us.
They came to us.
We don't have money to go to that.
What about a company called K Machine, who make welders? Strip welders and that, in rolling mills.
Yeah, I mean,
They went
you can't collect again, you cannot collect everything.
Yeah, but I mean,
Any other questions?
We do have a cake. So, I invite everyone to join us for cake and coffee to help celebrate our 30th anniversary.
Thank you all.